Let's talk about the very first contradiction in the Bible. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the Bible's first contradiction is between the two different creation accounts that appear at the very beginning of Genesis. One of these creation accounts runs from Genesis 1:1 through to the first half of Genesis 2:4. The other creation account runs from the second half of Genesis 2:4 through to the end of Genesis 3. And that second account is actually the earlier of the two accounts. So I'm going to start with that one. This one begins by talking about the day that God made earth and heaven. And earth is already there. The creation account never actually addresses the creation of heaven, but it starts with earth. Earth is there, but there's no plants, there's no animals, there are no humans. God causes a stream or a mist to rise up to water the ground. And then we have God creating, by manipulating the soil of the earth, a human. And the verb that is used for that creation is yatsar, which is the verb that is used to mean form and is frequently used to talk about the creation of pottery. And then God breathes the breath of life into the nostrils of the human, and they are a living soul. However, there's a problem. It's not good that the man is alone. And so God sets out to create a companion that would be suitable for the man, and begins by creating from the dust of the ground all the animals of the field and the birds of the air. None of them work out. Then God decides to create the woman from the side of Adam. So, important things to note here. God does not create by divine fiat. God creates by directly manipulating the raw materials of creation. And then their creation is initially not good. So they have to try to fix it. And their first attempt fails. So by trial and error, they manage to take their creation from a state of not good to a state of good. And in this account, the human is created first, then a garden is created, then all the animals of the field and the birds of the air are created. And finally, the creation ends up being good at the very end. That's the earlier creation account, and it also features an anthropomorphic corporeal deity who makes noise as they walk through the garden in the cool of the evening and has to manipulate the raw materials of creation. Now let's look at the other creation account, which was written later. And most scholars agree that this is the priestly creation account. This creation account was written by folks who were either members of a priestly class or were at least trying to advance the interests of a priestly class. And they are improving on the earlier creation account, and they are trying to supplant or supersede the earlier creation account. Their deity is a universal deity, and that deity does not create in a single day, but over 6 creative days, and then rests on the 7th. And it begins not by talking about the day that God made earth and heaven, but the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth. So we've switched the order there. We've added more grammatical elements, and God creates not by directly manipulating the raw materials of creation, but by divine fiat, by speaking things, and then those things are created. And the 6 creative periods are very symmetrical, and they seem to be riffing on creation accounts from the middle of the first millennium BCE in Mesopotamia. The first 3 days of creation are about the creation of 3 different environments. And then the second 3 days of creation are about the population of those environments. So day 1 corresponds to day 4, day 2 corresponds to day 5, day 3 corresponds to day 6. And here, everything that God creates is good immediately upon creation. There is no need to try to correct anything. There is no trial and error. And again, creation is not done by directly manipulating the raw materials. It is done by divine fiat. And in this creation account, the plants and the animals are all created before the human is created. The human is the crowning achievement, the culmination of creation, and the human is created good from the very start and is male and female at the very point of creation, rather than male first and then the female being separated off from the male. So in all of the main beats of the creative story, in Genesis 1:1 through 2:4a, we are improving upon what is going on in the earlier creation account. This is an attempt to retell the story of creation in a way that better fits the ideologies and the dogmas of the priestly authors. And so these two creation accounts directly conflict. Not only is the deity a very different deity, not only is the means of creation a very different means of creation, but also the order of creation is a very different order of creation. And you can tell that translators of the Bible are struggling with this because you will sometimes see Genesis 2:19 mistranslated, where the Hebrew says, "Then God formed from the dust of the ground every animal of the field and bird of the air." And this is happening after the creation of the human. So all of the animals of the field and the birds of the air are created after the human. This conflicts with Genesis 1, and so some translators will mistranslate the verb as a pluperfect, and they will render in Genesis 2:19, "Now God had created from the dust of the ground every animal of the field and every bird of the air." That is a mistranslation, pure and simple, but it is an attempt to overcome the contradictions here. Now, there are people who will say, well, genre makes it all go away, as if the fact that these are two different creation accounts that use very different words, very different phrases, very different syntax and grammatical structures means that one is a historical narrative and the other is not. And so we can just ignore the fact that they contradict each other. And that doesn't work. They are both telling the story of creation according to historical narrative prose. They are saying this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. The genres, in that sense, are the same, and they are very clearly telling two different stories of creation. Some people will say that the creation account in Genesis 2:4b to the end of Genesis 3 is focusing in on the sixth day of creation. But that also doesn't work, because it begins by saying there was not yet any plant of the field or anything growing on the earth. And that took place before the sixth day of creation, according to Genesis 1. So they're just not reconcilable if you're actually taking the text seriously. Now, are the texts going to reach out and stop you if you try to reinterpret them in a way that harmonizes the two different accounts? Of course not. They're texts. They have no inherent meaning. They can neither clarify nor expound nor correct. So the texts are not going to stop you from imposing your will upon them and altering what they are saying so that they fit your dogma. If you want to force them into harmony with each other, the texts are not going to stop you. But we can be here to tell you that's not a plausible, much less a probable, much less a certain interpretation of these texts. It's only a not impossible interpretation. But if you want to take the text seriously, if you're concerned for the most likely reading, if you're concerned with what we can be sure of in relation to the origins of these two different texts, they contradict each other because they come from two different times and places and two different groups of authors, and one is intended precisely to improve upon, replace, and supersede the other. And that's the first contradiction in the Bible. And the fit for this video is Purple Rain.